All right. So thank you again for signing up and being here today for this really great session, nonprofit grants, where to find them and how to win them. This session is being provided as a part of a series that we're putting on, we as in United Way, with the Black Empowerment Works program. And our entire Black Empowerment Works team welcomes you here today. That consists of me, Janae Bradley, Jeremiah Pennebaker, and Anaya Arnold. So a little bit about Black Empowerment Works before we get into the focus of today's conversation. So Black Empowerment Works promotes Black self-determination, social mobility, and economic prosperity by resourcing and funding community-based Black-led work. So essentially, it's an equity-focused grant program. Our goals are to really invest in advancing the well-being of Black people in Greater Cincinnati, and to do that through investing in ideas and work that often is left out of the traditional funding process. So work that goes unfunded or underfunded. For the Black Empowerment Works program in 2022, we've just opened up our third grant cycle, our third annual grant cycle. Applications opened on May 2nd. Reviewer applications will close June 8th, and grant applications will close July 1st at 5 p.m. So be sure, if you're interested in applying, to either be a reviewer, a person that makes decisions on what we invest in, or a grant applicant, so to receive funds for the amazing work that you're doing, that you apply by those specific deadlines. And you'll find all of our information on our website at uwgc.org/Black BEW apply. Sorry, uwgc.org/BEW apply. You'll find the links to the applications, information packets, and more. And you can always reach out to our Black Empowerment Works team, either by email or by phone, at the address, email address, and phone number shown on the screen. And we'll follow up via email with all of this information as well. But I know that you really came here to know and learn about nonprofit grants, where to find them, and how to win them. So I'm going to turn it over to Kent Mulcahy of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library to share his expertise. Thank you for joining us today, Kent.
Hi. All right. No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this. We have a lot to cover today. I'm going to try to, in a way, fit two separate presentations into a single event here today. So buckle up while we try to get through all this safely and get out safely on the other side. There's just a couple of things I want to go over right at the beginning. I'll keep it short. I just want to tell you a tiny bit about our program and what we do here for grants and nonprofit grants in the area. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a series. I'm going to do two classes in one. What I mean by that is every single month here at the library, we do 3 free virtual classes: Introduction to Finding Grants, Grants Research Lab, and Introduction to Proposal Writing. They are free. You just sign up through our website. At the very end, I'll show you where that website is and where you would register. Feel free to share this out with people. All our grants nonprofit stuff that we do, since we started doing this around 1980, has been word of mouth. So if you end up enjoying this today, tell your friends. Share around about it. We welcome anyone. I don't care where they are, where they're from, where they are in the world. We'll help anybody. So like I said, do stick around. I got a couple of free resources I want to share with you at the end, but otherwise, why don't we just go ahead and get right into it? So the way this is going to work today, we're kind of going over a little bit about how you write the grants and a little bit about how you find the grants. So the first part of the class, we're going to start with how you kind of assemble everything, or more, I guess specifically, I should say what you should expect to see in most grant proposals that you come across. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll wrap up. I'm going to do a live demonstration of a database that is free to you through the library that helps you find perfect foundation funding matches for your cause. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you. So hopefully You are now seeing the presentation. So yeah, welcome to Introduction to Proposal Writing. What are we going to cover today? Well, first of all, let me tell you what we're not going to cover. We are not going to cover an example of a proposal. Matter of fact, guess what? We are not going to look at a single line of an example of a proposal. And there's a few reasons for that. One reason is, okay, let's say we did want to look through a proposal, top to bottom. Let's go ahead and just look over the whole darn thing. Okay, let's go ahead and book off 24 straight hours. Okay, we're getting started here. Let's say we start at 12:15. By tomorrow at 12:15, we will have been done. We would have looked through the whole proposal. Okay, cool. You feel prepared. You go out, you get that first proposal packet in your hands. You're getting ready to get started on it. You start flipping through it. You're like, wait a second, hold on. This looks absolutely nothing like what that Kent guy showed me. Like it's totally different. And that's right. Every proposal that you come across from a different foundations, from different organizations, they could look wildly different. The order that things are asked you to assemble it in, the format that they take, what they're asking for could be totally different. So the real reason that we're not going over an example of proposal is not even because of that whole, it would take too long to do. It's because if we did it, it would not prepare you for proposals. Because again, they're all going to be different. So what we are going to talk about then are the basic components of submitting and writing a proposal for your nonprofit organization. Now, so the typical elements that you come across, in other words, like here are the things that you're going to see in almost every proposal you come across. Now, again, the order that they're asked for may be different. The format that they're asked for may be different, but we're going to go over a lot of the raw data, the raw information, so you can assemble everything before you even start putting together your rounds of proposals. So you'll have it all there and ready to go, and you can then mold it to however a given funder wants us. Which brings us to the proposal writing process. Now, this is an introduction to proposal writing course. So we're going to simplify it down to 4 main points that go into the proposal writing process. The first of which is, if it comes up, is the planning part. The what do you need the money for? What do they mean by this? So I think when they're saying, what do you need the money for? Of course, you need it for your nonprofit project. Of course, that's the case. But what they're getting at is when you talk to some of the most successful grant writers, one thing they say is foundations and funders tend to like to fund nonprofit projects. They don't as much like to fund overhead costs. Projects are the good old bread and butter, what we think of when we think about nonprofit missions. I think clothing drives, food drives, animal adoption events, things like that, right? Overhead costs are everything else. So if you're wanting to buy or renovate a building for your headquarters, overhead cost. If you're trying to bring on a consultant, overhead cost. Pay someone's salary within your organization or bring in a specialist. Those are all overhead costs. And funders typically aren't as excited to fund overhead costs. There's a few reasons for that. Those overhead costs aren't really as sleek and sexy as an actual project. So if you want to be cynical about it, maybe they're not as much fun to brag about at cocktail parties. What would you rather brag about? I gave X amount of dollars and Y amount of people got warm meals over the holiday season? Or do you want to say, I gave X amount of dollars and this one organization got new printers for their office, right? So, which is more fun to brag about? That's one reason, but I don't even think that's the real reason. I think grant writing and proposal writing comes down to, are you effectively illustrating where every hypothetical cent they could give you, do they really know exactly where that's going and how it's helping the community? If they're giving to a project, it's easy to understand. We're going to give this money. It's going to go right to this project that directly helps the people out in the community. Let's go back to the printer example. If they give you money to buy printers for your office, how does you having a new printer at your desk help that person who doesn't have warm clothing? How does it help them get the clothing they need, right? So it's a little tougher to illustrate that. So with that in mind, a lot of the more successful grant writers recommend that when possible, you save your grant writing for your bread and butter projects, and you kind of do your individual fundraising, your online social media campaigns, events, that type of individual fundraising. You do that for your overhead costs because you have a little bit more say in how to do it. Now, I'm not saying there are not grants out there for your overhead costs. There absolutely are. You just need to understand that if you go in trying to find the funders for that, it may take a little while longer for you to find those perfect funders that will fund your overhead costs. So that's what it means. What do you really need the money for? What is worth your time for grant writing? Which then brings us to the research part of it. The who will you approach? Now, I'm going to be right up front with you. My training, expertise, background, all of that is in the foundation research area. You know, I can tell you a little bit about writing a proposal, but to me, personally, the research stage, not the writing of the proposals, just the researching of who you're going to reach out to is just as important, if not sometimes more important than writing the world's perfect grant. Because A, the world's perfect grant doesn't exist. There's always room for improvement, right? So that's not a real thing. But hypothetically, let's say that you wrote the best proposal ever written in the history of the world. And it's actually on top of that, it's even a lot of fun to read. Good for you. But you send it off to a funder, a foundation who has no interest in your cause, has never had any interest in your cause, has never given a single grant similar to what you do. You are not going to change their mind with the perfect proposal. They have chosen a lane and they're going to stick in it. Flip that around though. If you write a proposal and that proposal is good, but you know, maybe there are some spots that need just a little bit of work, you could have improved a little, but you send it to that perfect funder. Their mission statement almost matches yours. They have a tax record provable history of funding nonprofits similar or organizations similar to that of your own. So you send them a proposal that's good, but could use a little work. There's a very strong chance they will reach out to you and say, you know what, let's talk. We read your proposal. We have a couple of questions about a couple of things, but overall, we think we might be a good match. So let's talk about this. That happens often, but not the other way around. So again, I think finding the perfect funder is just as important, if not sometimes more important than writing the best proposal you can. And actually the second part of today, where I told you we were going to go over a live demonstration of a database that's free to you through the library, it makes this otherwise very daunting task of researching the right funders. It makes it actually quite easy. So just, I wanted to kind of really kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent on the research portion of it. And then there's the writing. How do you put it all together? I could make this whole thing really short. How do you put a proposal together? Exactly the way the funder tells you to. Grant writing is basically all about following directions. As a matter of fact, if we wanted to wrap this up in the next few seconds, we could say, here's your introduction to proposal writing. Do what the funder tells you to do for the proposal. There, we're done. That's basically the long and short of it, though. Grant writing is can you follow directions? That said, even when a funder asks for things in a specific order, sometimes there are orders for you to assemble your own info that make more sense and make it easier for you. So we'll talk about strategies for gathering info, but then you do have to put it in the order and format that a funder asks for. And then the follow-up. So you're going to get a yes or a no. What do you do once the decision has been made? And you'll hear me say this again, you will get a lot of no's. Okay, you just will. Funders say that on average, they can only fund about 30% of the grant proposals that they get. And it just comes down to they can't fund everyone. So if they can only fund 30% of the proposals they receive and review, do you think that means you should expect to win every proposal you send off? Absolutely not. It usually doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. They just can't fund everybody. However, you can leverage a no into something very good for you, and especially if you're new to grant writing. So we'll talk about that at the very end. Moving on to research. I kind of already guilt tripped you on this one, so I'm not really going to go much further into it. Research is the first step. It's really all about just finding the right match for you. It's not about name recognition. It's not about how much money a foundation has. It's only about, do they fund what you do in the area that you do it? Okay, that's all it comes down to. And so really researching and not wasting your time or the funder's time by working on a funder that never had any chance to fund you, you save everybody a lot of time there. So with that in mind, just, you know, we'll cover the research part of it when I get to that database. But yeah, I'll try not to guilt trip you much more on that point right there. So yeah, how does what you do fit with the funder's interests? And as I already said, the why is just as important as the who. And you know, I would change this. The why is way more important than the who. Like I get requests, I get emails all the time. Hey, I'm going to apply to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I need just $1,000 for my little project I'm doing. Well, unless your project, and I'm simplifying here, unless your project is going over to developing nations and using technology to combat health crises, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation may not have $1,000 for you. And it's not because they don't care about what you do. It's just no funder can fund everything. They have to pick a lane and stay in it. So that just goes back to, it's about who is interested in what you do. Which brings us to the typical proposal elements. What are you typically going to see in a proposal? Notice it does not say proposal elements or what you're going to see every time. The best you can do for an introductory course is cover what you are usually going to see in most proposals. So we'll go through this kind of one by one, and then in the coming slides, we'll dissect them just a little bit more. And side note, and by the way, I did put a link to download the handout to today's presentation. So you'll have these slides. You can download them now. You can download them later, but you will have them. You can also email me afterwards if you'd like. But yeah, so if you look at this outline, it is rare when a funder does not specify in great detail the order they want you to put things together and what exactly they want. It is very rare. Okay. But when you find that rare instance where they just say, I don't know, just send us a proposal. We don't care what it's like. Send us a proposal. You should ask them, well, what do you want in it? Hopefully they'll give you a little more guidance. But if they don't, if they really just stick by, just send us something. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a decent kind of outline to follow if you don't have an outline otherwise. So let's just talk about this. First, you'll see the executive summary. The executive summary, guess what? It's the first thing that you see here. And I can almost guarantee that in every proposal you send, an executive summary of some sort will be the first thing that a funder asks for. But guess what? We are not going to talk about that right now. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about it very last for reasons that'll make more sense once we get there. Which brings us to the narrative. The narrative, and I know it's kind of hard to see, narrative is bold here. Anything down to conclusion, this is all one area. So the narrative encompasses all this stuff. If you were thinking about it as a physical, like you were being asked to print out a hard copy of your proposal, the narrative would take up the most pages. So again, we'll talk about these a little more in depth as we get along. But the narrative involves a statement of need. It has your project description, a little bit of organizational information, and then it has a conclusion. And like I said, we will dissect these in the upcoming slides coming up. So a narrative has a statement of need, a project description, a little bit of organizational information, and your conclusion. Then they will ask for a line item budget, every penny that they give you, where exactly would their dollars be going in your project. And then supporting materials. Supporting materials are tricky to talk about. Really, like we'll dissect a little more, but basically supporting materials are whatever extra stuff a funder asks for. So, and it can change, it can vary wildly. So it's really the main thing to remember about supporting materials is whatever they ask for, it's not optional, and don't send them things they don't ask for. All right, so let's keep moving from this and we will start talking about these individually. What do funders really want to know? Again, let's wrap this presentation up early. Let's make it really simple. What do funders really want to know? They want to know everything. There we go. We're done. Have a nice day. No, really, that is actually the case. We'll talk a little more about it specifically, but for reasons that'll make more sense a couple of slides from now, you will not bore funders with too much detail. I know that seems hard to believe. Just trust me, we'll kind of hash that out later. Funders really want to know everything, but let's get into specifics. What specific need are you addressing? Okay, what do they mean by that? Okay, someone says, what does your nonprofit do? We rescue animals. Okay, like cows? No, dogs. Oh, so you mean like domesticated animals? Okay, like all breeds of dogs? No, just certain breeds of dogs. Okay, like where? Like the entire United States? Oh, no, sorry, a very specific kind of community here in the area. So you have to be very, very, very specific. What specific need are you addressing? So that gets into, but when you get to the specifics, you need to keep in mind that whatever you're saying your nonprofit does, it needs to fit the size and scale of your solution and your organization. Funders have pretty much seen it all. So if your goals are a little lofty, once they look at the size of your organization, they're going to know it immediately. So that brings us to, when you're getting specific, what audience and what community are you serving? And also, what evidence do you have to support the need? And the example, and this kind of came up, actually, I've used this a lot from people that came to me for one-on-one appointments. When you get to the what evidence do you have to support the need? If I were to say that the tri-state area has, a drug addiction problem, that's all I say. I just say it has a drug addiction problem. I don't think anyone's going to chime in and say, no, it doesn't. But at the same time, that doesn't make me an expert on it, right? Anyone can look out their window, see a problem, state it. But what a funder wants to know is that you, the nonprofit carrying out the mission, or the organization carrying out the mission, you are an expert. You know where the areas of need are. You know what the biggest issues are. Now, admittedly, if a foundation is interested in a specific problem, they may know a lot about it. So you may not be telling them things that they don't already know. But the key thing here is they want to know that you know. So you're definitely going to have to back up why you exist and what your project is with evidence, data, facts, and figures. Now, where do you get this data? Where do you get these facts? Man, I wish there was a place in the community that offered free help and access to free resources, both physical resources and digital resources from your home, that helps you get access to things that help you find resources and data and facts and figures. Does a place exist? The library, right? We are definitely here to help with this part of it for you if you want it. Now, we're not going to be able to probably, unless it's really easily gatherable, we probably won't be able to do your full research project for you, not to get too into the weeds about what libraries do what, but we are a public library. We're not a research library. Our main goal is to share resources with you and show you how to use them and how to find them so that you can use them yourself and not have to pay someone else to do it. So if there is a fact, figure, statistic you're looking for your project and you're not finding us, reach out to us, okay? We will do our best. The easiest way to get in contact with us is research@chpl.org. CHPL is in Cincinnati Hamilton Public Library. So research@chpl.org. We'd love to help or try to help you gather the evidence to support why you exist in the first place. This is a step that I think a lot of folks neglect in their proposals. They don't back up why they exist in the first place. So moving on, what are you trying to achieve? What is the impact that you're trying to make? What are you trying to do? Now, whatever you're trying to do, it has to be measurable. In other words, you can't just say, here's what we want to do. And when it's wrapped up, you say, we did it. You got to be able to prove it, right? So how do you measure outcomes? I'm sure a lot of people have seen, when it comes to goals and objectives, I'm sure a lot of people have already come across or seen the SMART acronym. This is the kind of thing people print out and put up in their office. So your goals and objectives must be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Specific, we kind of already talked about. Like we are going to help animals, right? Well, what do you mean help them? Are you going to help do people need vet bills help paid? Are you going to help find adoptions? Are you going to try to get stray animals off the street? What are you doing? They need to be measurable. Again, it goes back to what is the measurement you're going to apply to assess whether you were successful or not? Do you have a number of people you want to reach? Is there a scale that you're going to have people fill out over the course of your project to show the effectiveness of it? But it needs to be measurable. It needs to be achievable and realistic, right? Again, most funders you go to are going to know very quickly if you've bitten off more than you can chew. So you got to keep that in mind. You really need to think about how many volunteers you have, how many people working in your organization you have, how many hours a week do you have to really devote to your project? Because a lot of times these projects may not be your full-time gig. So you really got to think about, here's the goal, does it look like you would really be able to meet it? And your goals and objectives, they need to be timely. What that means is, what are the check-in points along the way? What are your measurements that you're going to kind of take along the way to see if you're on track? And what is the cutoff point for when this funder's hypothetical grant, that money runs out? Some projects have an end date. We're going to go from here to here. Here's the end date. We'll know if we were successful or not. Some projects are just ongoing and they keep going. And if that's the case, funders are still going to want to say, okay, that's fine, but our funding needs to cut off a year from now, and then we'll check in and see if it was successful or not, and if we want to keep funding it. So we'll break these down a little bit more coming up too. So then the how do you know if you are successful part of it. This is where we're going to kind of talk about measurements just a little bit. And again, this is an introduction to introductory class in proposal writing. So let's just simplify it and say there are two types of measurements, quantitative and qualitative. I know we could probably go in the weeds with that, but for our purposes, quantitative are the ones, quantity, you're going to put a number on it. This type of measurement is easier to gauge. I'm not saying it's an easier project to do. It doesn't work that way, right? But it is easier to measure. Like, we are going to find homes for 50 dogs by the end of this project. Great. You either hit 50 or you don't. You made it or you didn't. But what if your project is a little bit more of an emotional nature? What if your project was, I don't know, you want to improve the self-esteem of middle school girls in a certain school district? I don't know. How do you put a number on that, right? What would you do? Give them like a survey at the beginning of the project and say, hey, how confident do you feel? And then once the project's over, you say, well, now how confident you feel? I guess you could do that, but that seems, I don't know what the word is, seems a little bit insensitive, maybe. I don't know. So if you can't easily quantify something, you got to get creative. And maybe you do testimonials. That's a very popular way to get more qualitative, more emotional type answers. Maybe you get testimonials with their permission. That's one way to do it. There's no one answer to it. That's the thing. There's no one answer. If you're doing a qualitative measurement type of situation, you really got to kind of measure against other programs that have been done similarly. And if anyone has any questions about measurements, there's a wonderful resource out there that the Kellogg Foundation made available. It's a handbook for evaluation. And what it does is it lists projects that other nonprofits have done and how they measured their success. I'm not saying you're going to find one exactly like yours, but you'll probably find something similar enough that, maybe it'll spark ideas for you. If you want access to that book, they're revamping their website or updating it, so it's not there right now. If you want the Kellogg Foundation's evaluation handbook, please email me outside of today's session, and I'll send you a link over to direct download that, because I saved it and I have it. It's a very useful tool. So those are the measurements of success. But then along the way, how do we assess the overall effectiveness of the project at the end? You may have met your target, but was it, successful? And, when you assess it at the end, did it all work out? Let's go ahead and simplify it again and say there are two types of assessments, formative and summative. Summative assessments are exactly what they sound like. They are, sum of all things. You sum it up. You're at the end of the project. Was it successful or was it not? Is this something we want to keep doing in the future? Should we change things moving forward? That's your summative assessment. Formative assessments are the check-ins you do along the way to see if you're on the right track. Now, if you talk to a funder and they end up giving you a grant, they are probably going to specify when they want you to check in along the way to make sure you're on target to do what you said you were going to do. But even if they don't ask for that, you should absolutely do formative assessments along the way. Otherwise, this is the situation you'll find yourself in. Well, our project wraps up next Tuesday. We haven't really been monitoring it. I sure hope we're on target to hit exactly what we wanted to do. It keeps you from being surprised as well. And Furthermore, if you see you're not, this is your goal, but you see you're kind of staggering, you're not quite getting up to where you want to go. If you are checking in along the way, maybe you can change things. You can kind of reevaluate and move on, change things and get back on track. Really quick before I move on to the next slide, Jenna, I see some questions. Well, I saw we're getting chats. Is there anything that you think we should tackle right now? Or?
They've all been addressed. You're great.
Oh, wow. Thank you. All right. Yeah, so moving right along. Actually, I got ahead of myself a little bit. I should have done the drop down there. So you're going to specify your objectives in measurable terms, talk about the key indicators of success. And then one thing I didn't talk about was however you gather your data and however you decide to measure things, you need to share those measurements and why you chose to measure and evaluate the way you did with funders in your proposal. That's going to be part of that narrative, is like why you decided to measure things the way you did. So you definitely want to include that. And then, as I talked about, develop a timeline to monitor the success of the program on an ongoing basis. So let's talk about a couple of questions that you are absolutely 100% without a doubt going to be asked. One of the questions that you will be asked is, why are you the best organization to do this work? Now, they may not ask it exactly in those words, but they will ask it, okay? And there's no one answer to this. There absolutely isn't. But you need to be prepared for it. So while there's no one answer, I can tell you what the wrong answer is. Okay, why are you the best organization to do this work? Yeah, it's a good question. Now that I think about it, there are a lot of other organizations out there that kind of do stuff similar to us. And, they've been around a long time. Heck, you've even funded them. So you know that they're really good at doing what they do. And we're new, kind of unproven. I don't know, maybe we're not the best organization to do this work. I know that's the wrong answer, right? The right answer, I think what they're getting at here, what the question is really asking is, what do you do that other organizations do not do? All right, that's what I think they are asking. So, you may say, okay, yeah, there are other organizations similar to what we do out there, but here's the need they're not filling. Here's the need gap. Here's the community that is not being served. Here's the neighborhood. Here's the demographic that is not being served by the existing nonprofits. That's what they're asking for. What do you do differently? What need gap are you filling? Which then brings us to, how will the project sustain itself in the long run? This one is funny and kind of frustrating. You are going to be asked this question. And there's a lot of answers that could go on with this, and it's also kind of confusing. When you put funders on just like point blank, what are you asking for with this? Most of them literally say, we just want to know you thought about it. They're not looking for anything specific. So with that in mind, there's not one specific answer for this, right? But again, I can give you a wrong answer. So how will this project sustain itself in the long run? Well, we are going to apply to you, and only you, by the way. We're not applying to any other foundations. Oh, and we're not doing any individual fundraising either. We're not doing any events or any online campaigns. We're just coming to you for this grant. We're asking for the full amount of the entire project. That's it. And so after that, this project runs out and we use your money, we're going to come back to you and apply again. That's the wrong answer. There could be a lot of answers, but to address a couple of those points in there, funders want to see that you are diversifying potential streams of income. They want to know that you are applying to multiple foundations, right? So for a single project, you should apply to multiple foundations. And the reason for that is, if you only apply to one foundation and it's for the full amount of your project, what will often happen is a funder will say, well, here's the deal. We like what you're doing. We like your project. We'd like to give you some money, but we just can't give you your full project budget. So what's the point of us giving you any money if that's not going to fund your project and you're not raising money anywhere else? So they want to see that you're applying to multiple funders. So with that in mind, some hypothetical things you could say, like, how's the project going to sustain itself in the long run? Well, we just brought on a fundraising specialist who's going to coordinate events for us over the next year. They have tons of experience. They've raised a lot of money in the past, and they're going to do that for us. You could say, well, we met this guy Kent at the library. He told us about this great database that links us up with funders. We're going to set up one-on-one meetings with him and learn to use this database to find many, many, many more foundation matches. Obviously, I'm making this up as I go. But again, the point is, they just want to know that you thought about it. That is all. So the conclusion, not the conclusion of the slideshow, but we are close. I promise. We are close. I promise you. The conclusion of your proposal. The conclusion of the proposal, I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it really is just kind of a thank you for your time, sum it all up, right? So it's kind of a thank you for your time in reading this proposal, and maybe you hit a couple of the key points about what you're trying to achieve with the project. That's really about it. Here's the important thing about the conclusion, though. I don't have an exact fact or figure, but I would assume that close to 90% of all people who write proposals, their conclusion is the exact same for every proposal they send out for a given project. They just do a find and replace of the name of the foundation they're sending it to. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get funding. It doesn't automatically knock you out. What I'm saying is, if you take the time to make as much of the conclusion about that funder that you're sending it to and only that funder, it will get noticed. And this is where the research portion comes into play. When you research a foundation, what you're learning is what makes them tick. Each foundation, you have to treat them like a person. People like to be talked to differently. They have different learning styles. They have different ways they like to be introduced, those types of things. So the more you research a funder, know what makes them tick, know specific things about them. When you sprinkle that into your proposal and they know it's about them and only them, they will see that you took the extra time and you're not just sending out proposals to random people because you know they have a lot of money. So even though it's more time consuming, it's definitely well worth your time. And even more so is doing that worth your time in the executive summary. If you'll remember from that outline, the executive summary was the first thing listed. And yes, it's almost all the time going to be the first thing that's asked of you in a proposal. We're talking about it last. Why are we talking about it last? Well, it says, how do I reduce everything to one page? Well, not only are we talking about it last, it is the last thing you should write when you're sending out a round of proposals. You gather everything else we just talked about together, and then you write the executive summary, because it says, how do I reduce everything down to one page? How do you know what everything is until you're done with everything? So you put it all together, then you start writing your executive summaries. Executive summaries are one page documents that are basically an overview of everything that goes into your proposal. All right. So the executive summaries, this is very important. Of all the things in your proposal, if you're going to tailor it to the single funder you're sending it to and just that one, this might be the most important place to do it, because the executive summary is the only thing that everyone who reads your proposal will actually read. A lot of times when you send off your proposal to a large foundation, there's a board of people who review proposals that come in. Each of them likely have their specialty. So one reviewer may read your executive summary, then jump straight to your budget. Another reviewer may read your executive summary, and since they have a lot of experience doing projects, they jump right to your project and how you're going to do it and everything you say you're going to do, right? So knowing that it's the only thing everyone will actually lay eyes on and read word for word, this is where it's your time to shine and show that you really researched them and you know, and they know why you're reaching out to them. So again, it takes more time to do it, but it's worth it in the end. And let's talk about what goes into an executive summary. Now, I'm going to tell you what goes into an executive summary, and I'm also going to share with you a format that the executive summary often takes. But here's what I really want you to understand. There is no official set format or order for things to be added to your executive summary. So when I share this order with you, when you're putting yours together, if you want to use a different order, or if you try to make it work in this order and it's just not working for you, that's fine. As long as all the content is somewhere in there, you're good. So don't obsess over that. So executive summaries are typically 2 paragraphs, maybe 3. And that third paragraph is nothing more than a couple of sentences that are basically thank you for your time, right? So the first paragraph is typically the statement of need. What is a statement of need? A statement of need is not the need of your nonprofit. It's not about how much you're asking for. What do you mean it's not? Of course, that's the need. You're writing a proposal to get money, right? Yes. But in this case, the statement of need is about the community. Why do you exist? why does this project exist? So right out of the gate, you're telling a funder about the problem that exists that needs to be tackled, right? So the first paragraph has the statement of need. Then it has, that's basically it, right? So after that, you're going to, you know what? I think my notes mixed up. Let me jump over here. Yeah. So the first paragraph has the statement of need, a little bit about your organization, just a little bit about your organization as a whole, and then how much you're asking for. First paragraph, right off the bat, why beat around the bush? They know you're coming to them for money, right? So again, first paragraph of the executive summary, the statement of need, a little bit about your organization and how much you're asking for. The second paragraph of an executive summary is often your goals and objectives and your project, kind of what you're going to do. And then again, the third paragraph is just kind of a thank you for your time. So one last time, remember, you are going to get a recording of this if you need to review it, but the first paragraph of an executive summary is the statement of need, of the community's need, a little bit about your organization and how much you're asking for. Second paragraph is basically your project, its goals and objectives. And then the third paragraph is maybe a thank you for your time kind of deal. So that's the executive summary. And above all, anything else, if you take the time to make the executive summary about that funder and that funder only, it will absolutely get noticed, I promise you. Which brings us to finally the supporting materials. Again, difficult to talk about because it's kind of up to the funder. So not knowing exactly what they could ask for, just remember, follow the funder's guidelines. Include everything they ask for and nothing else is how I would put it. So let's think about it this way. I like to put it this way. If a funder asks for 3 things in their executive, in their supporting materials, don't send them 2.7 things and don't send them 3.3 things. Send them 3 things. And it's not optional. If they ask for something that you don't have, you can't just leave it out and say not applicable. You need to reach out to them and say, hey, this thing that you're asking for, we just don't have that. That's not something we have. Is there anything we could do to supplement that? You've got to address it. All right. Now for online applications, and this is tucked into the supporting materials section, but it really kind of applies to your, especially if you're submitting your proposal online. For the most part, it's okay to add links. But I always personally like to confirm whether it's okay to do that before I send them. And a couple of things about that. Double, triple, quadruple check that you are sending a link that you think you are actually sending. We can all think of some hypothetical situations of copying and pasting gone wildly wrong, where you send something in that proposal you really didn't mean to send them, right? So make sure you're sending the right link. The other thing is, this is professional writing. This is not the time for you to send, a GIF or a YouTube video, even if it's totally safe for work and somehow appropriate, ties into the project. It's not a time for that. This is professional writing. But the last point about links is, I can't help but fight the feeling that when you include links in a proposal, I bet the funders usually don't actually open them. I can't prove that, but I just feel like that's the case. So with that in mind, when I add links, like let's say there's not a nice colorful chart or graph you want to include, I still recommend writing out in full the key facts and figures, statistics you want them to see in that graph, and also send the link, because I think a lot of times they won't open it and they won't get the content that you want them to see. It's just a little bit about links there. And then the follow-up. You're going to get a yes, you're going to get a no. Like I said, you're going to get both yeses and nos. What do? If you get a yes, keep the funder informed. Do what you say you're going to do, of course, and then be responsive. Be responsive. I think what they're getting at by that is, yeah, answer their questions. But even as you get an email and they ask a question, the person who knows the answer to that question won't be in until next week. Still immediately write back and say, oh, the person that knows that answer, she won't be in until next Tuesday. When she gets in, the second she gets in, we'll have her write to you. That way you're being, very, very responsive. In the do what you said you were going to do part, yes, of course, that means don't take their money and buy a speedboat with it. That's obvious. But what I think they're really getting at is, remember you sent them a line item budget. They have proof of every penny that they give you, exactly where it's going to go. Let's go back to those formative assessments for a second. You remember those are the check-ins, like here's your goal, the check-ins you do along the way to make sure you're on track to meet your goal. If you're doing those formative assessments and you notice that you're kind of tanking, you're not hitting where you want to be, but if you diverted some funding, you could get yourself back on track. It's usually okay to do that, but you can't do it without asking the funder first. Even if all the money stayed firmly within the project, they do not want to see at the very end that you did something else with their money. So you need to go with them and say, hey, can we change a little bit of what we were going to do with your money? Can we change it and do this with it? Most of the time they're going to say yes, but they want to know about it in advance. And then you get a no. Like I say, you're going to get a lot of them. I want to throw that figure out at you again. Funders say on average, they can only fund about 30% of the proposals they get. So with that in mind, it's probably not personal. You probably didn't do anything wrong. They just can't fund everybody. You do have a right to find out why, though. And most of the time, when you reach out to a funder, the reason's going to be, we just can't fund everybody. So, you reach out to them, you say, thank you so much for taking the time for reviewing our proposal. Didn't work out this time. Is there anything we could do better in the future to get funding from you? Most of the time, they're going to say, no, we just can't fund everybody. But occasionally, a funder will say, well, yeah, you know what? There was a part of your proposal that kind of didn't make sense to us, and we just didn't really feel comfortable giving you the money. You don't want to hear that because you worked so hard on the proposal. Nobody likes getting a paper marked up with red ink with all the things you need to change. But also, don't you kind of want to know that? Getting feedback on grant writing is notoriously difficult. It's just hard to get feedback. And as painful as it is to get no's, if you reach out and kind of find out why, it's a chance for you to get feedback and become a better grant writer. I don't think enough people do that. And you really need to take the time to reach out to them and find out why. Also, while you have them on the line, if they say no, you say, okay, well, thank you for that. I understand. Can we apply again in the future? Most of the time they're going to say yes. Yeah, go right ahead. We'll take a look at it next round. Sometimes they'll say, no, I don't think you should. I don't think we're a good match, and here's why. In that case, wouldn't it be a good thing to know so you don't waste more of your own time in the future applying to them? Here's the thing, though. Here's the biggest tip I can give you that I don't think enough people do. When you get a no, or actually even when you get a yes, you can write back to the funder and say, well, thank you for taking the time to read it. Are there any other foundations out there or other funders out there that you think would be a good match for us that you think we should reach out to? Guess what? The funding world, the foundation funding world, it's not like the business world. It's not necessarily competitive. They know you are going to be out there seeking grants from other foundations. They want to see that you are doing that. And oftentimes funders will say, yeah, you know what? I think the blah, blah, blah foundation would be a really good match for you. Great. You just saved yourself a lot of research time. If you feel comfortable enough with the funder, you can even say, wow, thank you. That's a great recommendation. Would you be willing to serve as the contact person and introduce us to that foundation? Then you have a contact you didn't previously have. Very important. Not enough people do it. Here's the biggest point when you get a no. Move on. Start again. Don't obsess over it. It's probably not because you did anything wrong. Okay, just got to get back up, research again, start again, get back into it. That's the best advice I can give. Like, just don't take it personally. Keep moving. All right. So at this point, that is the end of the proposal writing part of this. So I thought now would be a good time to stop for half a second before I start showing you the database and ask Jenna, were there any questions that came in that we should address right now?
There are no questions that were in the chat, but we open the space. If folks have questions, either raise your hand, come off mute, or type them in the chat.
Mm-hmm. While we're doing that, there's something I forgot to open up that I wanted to show everyone while we're waiting to see if questions come in.
I had a question.
Yeah.
One of the things you were talking about, like feedback, I wish I could get some feedback. Like even when I write back to people, like I feel like it's like you never get a call back, or if I call, I don't know the right person to talk to. And so the receptionist just says, no, we don't talk about it basically.
Yeah.
Do you know of a way that we could get feedback on our proposals?
Yeah. So again, good question and notoriously difficult to do. There are a couple of things. And first of all, let me say this, because I'll just go ahead and say this is something I usually say at the end. At the library, we're unable to be that for you. Whoever, like the grant position here is like, it's half grant stuff and half all the other reference librarian stuff. So we don't have the time to do that sort of service justice. There are a couple of organizations I would recommend you look into. One of them is One Source Center for Nonprofit Excellence. They are a local nonprofit that helps local nonprofits. Every now and then they'll offer a kind of grant writing boot camp, or they will offer like individual drop-in sessions. So I would recommend starting to follow One Source Center for Nonprofit Excellence. This is something that they do every now and then. And also, I'm not going to lie, this is usually not free to join, but if you are really writing a lot of grant proposals, it's taking up a lot of your time in your work for your organization. The Grant Professional Association's Cincinnati chapter is a great organization to at least get connected with, at least talk to, even if you don't join right away. They're worth knowing about. They're a really, really good organization, and they can often connect you with people. Now, again, I can't guarantee that there will always be a free resource from them for grant reviewing and grant writing. But if you are going to spend money for this, for a consultation thing, which most often you kind of have to do, personally, I think the Grant Professionals Association chapter is about the most reputable place around here.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks. Anything else coming in? Oh, so I think someone came in with something about a nonprofit that helps catch a fire. Yeah. Okay. I got to admit, I'm not as familiar with them, but that is a great tip, and you best believe I'm going to be looking them up as soon as we're done here.
Yeah, Catch a Fire is pretty cool in that they you can join their organization, and then you can post an unlimited number of requests for projects, and it's a system that has both professionals from all around the country and that are volunteering their time to support you on a project.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's really cool. One thing that hit me that I kind of forgot to pull up beforehand, that I did pull up now that I thought would show people is, shoot, sorry, I just hit the wrong button here. My apologies. If you go to a website, philanthropyohio.org, that is philanthropyohio.org. Right on the homepage in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see a search bar just like you see in every website. If you type in Common Grant Application, just search for Common Grant Application. The first thing that's going to come up is a Word document that you can download. Now you're going to see that the Word document says it was created in 2008. Yes, that's true. That's a long time ago. But as you'll see in a second, because I went ahead and pulled it up and I'm going to show you here in a second, this document is an outline that you can fill out before any round of proposals that you're going to be doing. Before you start writing a single funder about it, this outline will help you. And the questions that they ask are evergreen. They are not going to go out of, they're never going to really go away as being important. So here is the Common Grant Application form that you get when you do that. I am going to jump to a random spot of this. Let's just see here. What is the research, statistics, or evidence that shows this need or benefit exists? What's the problem, challenge, unaddressed, or unmet? So we kind of talked about that. What's the unmet challenge? That's the why are you the best organization to work with? Let's see here. How will outcomes be measured? If this is an ongoing project, how are you going to measure it? Short-term immediate goals. What was up here? Brief description, evidence of effectiveness. In other words, if you take the time to fill this out before you start writing a single proposal, you will have all the raw data and raw information you need to fill out any proposal that comes your way. Now, you'll have to change the order, you'll have to change the format, but the raw information will be there. It is 10 pages long. I don't know if you can see that. You will hate yourself and everyone around you as you fill this document out, but I promise you, and people have come back to me and told me this, if you fill out every question that applies to your project that you can, it will make the actual writing much, much easier. So I cannot recommend that resource enough. All right. Anything else coming in?
Janae had to hop off on another meeting, but I'm Jeremiah. I'll be moderating, but
Oh, hi. Okay.
what's going on? But there's no other questions in the chat for now.
Okay. So then here's what I'll do. Remember how I hammered home the point of researching the right funders? You don't just want to reach out to people because of name recognition. It's really about, do they fund what you do, right? It doesn't seem like an impossible question to find, but it is not easy to find via Google. And I have nothing against Google. That's a misconception about reference librarians, is that we hate Google. No, we love it. I would call in sick if I knew Google was down for a day. I would just not even try, but Google is just not good for researching foundation funding. The best thing for researching foundation funding is that database that I hinted at earlier. This database is called the Foundation Directory Online. It is kind of the industry standard tool to research foundation funding. It really doesn't get any better than this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you for that. So here you go. This is the Foundation Directory Online. It is available to you at the library. And this is one of our few databases. Unfortunately, this one is not available from your home. You do have to be in a library to use it. You can come to any one of our 41 locations and access this database. I'll show you exactly where to go to find it. If you go to our website, which is cincinnatilibrary.org, and by the way, you can use one of our public computers, just sign in there, or if you bring your own laptop, as long as you're signed on to our Wi-Fi, you can access it. So if I go to cincinnatilibrary.org, under the Services tab, I see nonprofit grants. If I click that, I am now on the nonprofit grants page. And if I scroll down a bit, I see Foundation Directory Online, and it says available for in-person use at any of our 41 branches. So that's where you would go. I would click this link right here, and I would start using the database. So here it is, the Foundation Directory Online. There was a time before this database existed, before everything went digital, that the only way to research foundations was to look at their 990 tax forms. I don't think anyone wants to look at a tax form if they don't have to. So this just makes it a lot easier. And I will also tell you, before we get into this database here today, I do a very, very in-depth class on this database every single month. I do it once a month. It's free. You can sign up through it through our website. This will be kind of a taste of it today. And one thing I want to impress upon you, I was once asked to do a 4-hour presentation on just this database. I tried to talk them out of it. That seemed to be what they wanted, so I did it. I hated the sound of my own voice by the end of it. The reason I'm telling you that is at the end of the 4 hours, I really didn't cover everything the database does. So please know that just in this kind of truncated version of the full class that I do, I won't be able to cover everything that the database does. So if you come away from this today and you're thinking, I don't think the Foundation Directory Online is the tool I need to research foundation funding, contact me and let's talk about it, because it most likely is. So here we are, we're on the home page. And I see a basic search that I can do. There's also an advanced search. I cover the advanced search in the full class. Today, we're just going to do a basic search so you can just kind of get a gist of it. To do a good search in this database, you only need to think about 3 things. What do you do? Where do you do it? And who do you do it for? What do you do? Where do you do it? And who do you do it for? In my case, we're going to say I'm an animal shelter in Cincinnati, Ohio. What do? I'm an animal shelter. Where do I do it? Cincinnati, Ohio. The who do I do it for is not really important in this case. We're just going to skip that one for today. So this is a good search for me. So I am going to hit search. And here I go. And it actually, for some reason, did not. So there has been a very strange, there we go. I had to do it again. So I searched for animal shelter in Cincinnati. It found 123 grant maker matches. Clearly this is not 123, so I'm going to hit view all. It shows 100 at a time. So now this is where you really use the database. You start crawling through these individual funder profiles that have funded animal shelter causes in Cincinnati. And remember, it doesn't matter where the funder is located. If there is a funder based out of New Jersey, it is showing that they have funded grants in Cincinnati, right? It's about where you do your mission. That's the important thing that this database searches for, not about the location of the funder. So we're just going to go with Greater Cincinnati Foundation because it's a good profile to look for. So when we look through this, right at the top, we get some really good information, but we're going to kind of skip this just for the sake of time. Here, I get a nice snapshot of what is being funded. So in other words, where currently are the given foundation's priorities? And priorities of foundations do shift. That is okay. Like, you know, over the course of time, they pick different problems they want to attack, and that's kind of where they focus. And disclosure, COVID falls under human services. So of course, human services is at the top. Now, you'll have to trust me on this. Animal shelters fall under the environment category in this database. So I see that I'm not at the top of their priority list, but personally, I don't take this as I shouldn't apply to them. I just have to accept that maybe I'm not going to ask for $1 billion gazillion from them. All right. So, you know, that's just, it's nice to see where their priorities are, to see kind of where your chances are. And then there's a nice map of where they give money to. I mean, not really helpful for a place that has Cincinnati in its name. Of course, it's going to be the darkest state. It's more helpful for funders who say they're national funders, because a lot of national funders, they say they're national funders, but you open it up and they fund California and New York, and that's it. And then how big is their typical grant size, which seems important, except for when I scroll down, I now see a category specifically tailored to grants. And I see the most common grant amount is $7,200. Ignore this for a second. We'll get there. I know these are bigger. Well, that's a pretty big discrepancy. I see here their typical grant size says $10,000 to $25,000, but this is $7,200. Why is this number lower? This is, again, overall, doesn't matter what type it is, just typically their grants are $10,000 to $25,000. But for what I searched for, showing grants for what I searched for, the most common amount is $7,200. So that puts me in my ballpark of maybe what I should ask for. Yes, I know these numbers are higher. Who knows why that is? Maybe these have longstanding relationships with the Greater Cincinnati Foundation and they feel comfortable asking for more money. Maybe they have a contact. The bottom line is, if you haven't worked with them before, you have no history, no contact, this is probably a safe ballpark number for you to ask for in your grant to them. A little bit more of their funding interests, which we're going to skip for the sake of time today. If there are related organizations, they're going to show up right there. They are their specific program areas. This is really great. Remember how I said when you're writing executive summaries and conclusions, this is where you can really get some great information to pack that with, so that they know you're writing to them and only them. You can use the buzzwords that they use themselves to impress upon them that you really, really researched them. So this is a really huge area, and also really great. Like, let's say you're trying to get someone on a phone or in for a meeting. This gives you great talking points to cut right to the chase as to why you're contacting them in the first place. Based on what I searched for and who I'm currently looking at, it gives me up to 6 additional funders that I should at least look into. It doesn't even mean that they're definitely somebody I'm going to apply to, but there's enough of a correlation that I should at least look into it. Then you get a little bit about what goes into an application. It's just a snapshot. There's no way for them to tell you fully the work that goes into a full proposal in 10 sentence fragments. But it's a good start for you to know whether it's something you can tackle, or whether maybe, it's a little bit in depth for me. I'm new for this. I don't think I'm ready for this. But it just kind of tells you what goes into submitting an application for them. And then this is a huge section for me, the giving limitations. As a matter of fact, when I'm looking at a large list of funders, I skip everything else I just looked at first and jump straight to this. Because while we know that the Greater Cincinnati Foundation funds my kind of organization, my cause, there may be a project that they don't fund. So let's say, uh-oh, I realize that our organization is in the red. We're kind of running at a deficit budget-wise here. I'm going to try to get a grant to get back out on top. Well, I see no grants to deficit financing. So maybe they're a good match for just my typical project. Maybe I want to upgrade kennels or run an adoption event for my animal shelter, but they are not who I'm going to go to for deficit financing. Here's a little bit of financial information, which personally, this information is not too useful to me when I'm doing big research projects. These 990 forms, again, the database exists, so hopefully you don't have to look at a 990 form all that much again, but also 990 forms, the tax forms that foundations file, have to be publicly available. So you do not need this database to look at them. You can go to GuideStar to look at tax forms, guidestar.org. You can literally search the phrase 990 finder, and the same people that run this database have their own 990 finder that comes up that's pretty easy to use. And as far as the financials, I don't look at these because all this tells me is whether or not they are a large or a small foundation. And that doesn't matter to me. The only thing that matters to me is whether they fund my cause or not. The who's who list, maybe I knew someone I didn't know I knew. There is nothing anyone can do better than a contact. So it is worth really trying to explore these contacts to see if you could just, cut through everything and get someone right on the phone. I'm going to skip this part for time's sake. All of their social media right in one handy dandy spot if you wanted to keep tabs on what they're doing, maybe events they're holding. And then all the way tucked down here at the very bottom, I'm going to show you this to illustrate a point. When you're looking at these profiles, you really want to crawl through them line by line, because tucked under here, under additional contact information, grant application email. Wow, does this seem like something you should know? Absolutely. So it does make it very, very, very easy for you to cut right to the chase a lot of the time. So you need to really scroll to the bottom. Now, all this is great. Let's say you come to the library to use this. What are you going to do? Bring a notebook and write all this down, or print out 100 pages of your findings? I guess you could, but the database also makes it very, very easy to share this information. I could click this icon and generate a PDF of everything I just looked at, or I could click the email icon and just email this profile to myself and any other number of folks in my organization. So we could all look at this. Great thing to do. If you think this is a good match, you could upload this file to whatever cloud storage your organization is using, whether it be Microsoft Teams, Google Drive, Dropbox, and say, hey, I just uploaded the Greater Cincinnati Foundation's profile. I want everyone to look at that. If you know anybody in the who's who, you are our contact. Another great way to get your results, I'm going to go back one step to where we were just looking at the search results. I can check all of these. If I just wanted a list of funders and nothing else, I could check this list, and using this grid icon right here, I can generate a spreadsheet, which I didn't do before, but I did want to show you a spreadsheet right here. Sorry about this. That's my fault. So when I use this to generate a spreadsheet, what I get is a nice, neat list of funders. It populates them all, and amazingly, all of their contact info in one handy dandy spot. I love that feature, that not only does it give you their names, if you want to just take that list home and research it as you can, or maybe share these names with stakeholders to see if they know anybody or they've worked with them before. Again, all available contact info right there and ready to go for you. I love that. Again, that's by checking the first 100 results and then clicking this grid icon. So I am really hoping everyone sees how useful this database is. Remember, this was just a very quick rundown. There's an entire class devoted to it. So I think what I'm going to do now is there's a couple of resources I want to show you very, very quickly. If anyone has chat questions, you can go ahead and start sending them my way. But before I do that, if you wanted to register for the next Grants Research Lab course that we're doing, if you wanted to take the full version of the database tutorial, again, go to cincinnatilibrary.org. Under the Services tab, I see Nonprofit Grants. And if I scroll down a bit, I finally see Latest Events, and I see Grants Research Lab. It's taking place on June 14th, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And remember, if you can't make that exact date or time, as long as you're registered, you will automatically get an email of a recorded version of the session. But I can click here, Grants Research Lab, and then I can register. You can register with your library card if you want to, but you do not need a library card to register. I have people from all around, honestly, I've had people from all around the world joining this course over the course, since we started doing these virtual. But yeah, your name, email, as long as you use your email, you are good to go. And you can join me for the next Grants Research Lab session. In general, on our grant, also on our nonprofit grants page, you can send me direct questions. You can, there's a curated list of books, but yeah. So that's our nonprofit resource page. And I also wanted to make you just very quickly aware, I'm not going to talk about it too much today. If you take the other classes from me, the full versions of Introduction to Finding Grants, the full Grants Research Lab, and the full Introduction to Proposal Writing, you'll hear a lot about this site. Candid is the name. Again, they are a national nonprofit that helps nonprofits. And if you're not familiar with them, you really need to bookmark this site. I can't, we partner with Candid to bring you these resources. They run the database. They also put together the slideshow we looked at today. But learning.candid.org is really, I can't think of a better place for your general questions about anything funding and or nonprofit related. Under resources, there's a knowledge base section. Again, resources. I just click on knowledge base. And it's just entire suites of information. So if I were, where can I find demographic information about my community? If I open this up, it would be every resource on this entire site put into one page. Let's see, difference between nonprofit, not-for-profit, just general information. They also, under training, they have a free set of videos to watch, such as Introduction to Project Budgets. They also have live webinars that they host. Everything except for intermediate or advanced trainings are free on this website. If you see anything that involves a charge, it's intermediate or advanced. And actually, this is my course. They actually put that up there. But yeah, so different things you can register for there. So with that, that's kind of what I have for you today between the introduction to proposal writing and then just kind of getting you acquainted with the Foundation Directory Online, a tool that I really hope you'll use. Does anyone have any questions for me?
There is nothing in the chat, but feel free to put something in the chat and I'll relay it to Mr. Kent or just come off of mute and speak.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if everyone has my email address or not, but I'll just throw it in the chat again really quickly. I think you probably should have it, yeah. But that's me, chpl.org. And oh, thank you, Mia. I appreciate that. Thank you, Candace. I appreciate that as well. I think a lot of this, the questions don't really come in until you actually start trying to do the stuff we talked about, especially with the database. A lot of the questions don't come in until you start trying to use the database. And I'm not going to lie, the database is not as easy as a Google search. If it were as easy as a Google search, it wouldn't be the powerful tool that it is. So there's a little bit of a learning curve, but I am here. I do one-on-one meetings. After you've taken the full Grants Research Lab session, I'm happy to do one-on-one meetings with you at the main library or at a branch, or even a Zoom meeting can be helpful for this. So yeah, just be patient with yourself and we're always here to help.
And just to make sure, Janae and I will be sure to share all the information and links that have been provided today, as well as we've been recording this session. So that will also be shared out afterwards as well, and it should be on our website.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out. Thanks for all the folks who stuck around too. I know this was kind of a marathon session, so please know I definitely appreciate that. Normally, these are two classes that are around an hour and 15 minutes each, so I tried to squeeze a lot in there.
Okay. But if there are any other questions, like I said, we will share out his contact information. If you need anything from us on the Black Empowerment Work side, you can reach out to us through the black-led@uwgc.org, as well as our hotline 513-762-7233. But yeah, thank you all for showing up. I'll hang around to see if there's any lingering questions, but that is our session for today. Thank you.
Thank you.